I didn't plan the party to prove anything. I planned it because no one else would. My parents were coming up on their 40th anniversary, and my sister floated the idea of a small celebration, maybe just a lunch she'd texted in the group chat. My brother replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Then, nothing. Weeks passed. No venue, no planning, no effort. So, I stepped in. I spent 2 months researching charter options out of Santa Barbara. I found a yacht with polished wood decks and a private dining salon that could seat 30. I hired a live orchestra, just strings and keys, soft enough to let people talk. I sourced 3 cases of curated wine from a sommelier who specialized in coastal pairings. And the flowers I asked a boutique florist to replicate my mother's wedding bouquet in white tulips and ranunculus. She cried when I showed her the inspiration photo. I thought that meant something. Altogether, it cost me $1,800. I didn't tell my parents the exact amount. Just said it was taken care of. They didn't ask. And maybe that should have been my first sign. But at the time, I didn't care. I took time off from my freelance clients. I coordinated schedules, held Zoom calls with vendors, drafted a seating chart that subtly kept my father from cornering my cousin with unsolicited investment advice. Every detail was thoughtful, precise. Not because I wanted recognition, but because I believed this would finally be a moment where we stood side by side, not in roles. Not me as the helper, the organizer, the quiet one who fixes things. Just me, their daughter, present. The final invoice came through a week before the event. I paid it without flinching. And then, almost immediately after my aunt texted, the tone was casual, almost flippant. By the way, it said, "We're keeping the guest list tight. You're not included." I stared at the screen thinking it was a mistake. Some kind of scheduling miscommunication. Then my mom followed up with a second message. "It's not personal. Hope you understand." I didn't answer. I didn't call. Instead, I just sat there holding my phone trying to remember the last time they looked at me like family instead of staff. I kept staring at the message like it might rewrite itself if I waited long enough. "We're keeping the guest list tight. You're not included. No apology, no explanation. Just that." At first, I thought maybe she'd sent it to the wrong person. I waited for a follow-up, some kind of correction. "Oops, wrong thread." Or even a laughing emoji. But nothing came. Just silence. Then my mother's name popped up on my screen. I opened the message. "It's not personal. Hope you understand." And somehow that hit harder. That line, "It's not personal," I'd heard it before. When they forgot to call on my birthday 2 years in a row. When they took a family trip to Yellowstone and told me afterward they assumed I'd be too busy to come. When my sister's boyfriend of 2 months got an invitation to Christmas dinner and I didn't. It was always the same message, "Hope you understand." Hope you understand we forgot. Hope you understand it wasn't meant to hurt. Hope you understand you don't matter enough to include, but just enough to clean up after. I didn't text back. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't plead for space on the guest list of a party I planned. Instead, I scrolled through my calendar, stared at all the appointments I had scheduled for their big day catering confirmations, wine delivery orchestra, arrival time, yacht access window. I saw my own name listed on every email, every booking, every receipt. But somehow, I wasn't on the guest list. I put my phone down and stood in the kitchen unsure what to do next. My hands felt like they didn't belong to me. There was nothing to fix, no miscommunication to clear up. They had made their decision. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I could make one too. I didn't tell anyone what I was about to do. Not my friends, not my siblings. Especially not them. I opened my laptop and pulled up the contract for the yacht. The cancellation window was still open though, barely. I sent an email to the coordinator citing a change in event terms and requested the deposit be returned. Within minutes, I received a confirmation. Next was the orchestra. The lead violinist had been kind in every call he'd even offered to shorten the set when I asked about budget limits. I messaged him directly, told him the event had been reshaped, and asked to pause the remaining balance. He replied with grace. Said he understood. The wine shipment was trickier. The sommelier was already packing crates ready to deliver. But when I flagged the order and explained that the party had changed drastically, she agreed to hold. No refund, but no delivery either. I could live with that. The flowers were already in motion. Custom work. Non-refundable. I didn't even try to stop it. Let them arrive. Let someone else figure out where to put 24 arrangements of white tulips and pale blue ranunculus. That part wasn't mine anymore. I sat on the dock that night, the one just a few blocks from my apartment, watching the water stir beneath the dim lights of the marina. If I leaned forward, I could still see the harbor where the yacht would have departed. I imagined the empty decks, the missing music, the clinking of plastic wine cups instead of stemmed glass. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not revenge, just distance. A clean detachment from something I had once tried so hard to be part of. They made it clear I wasn't invited. I just made sure they noticed I was gone. The morning of the party, my phone started ringing just after 6. I was still in bed, eyes barely open, the sun just beginning to cut through the blinds. I didn't pick up. The first few calls came in quick succession, my dad's name lighting up the screen each time. No voicemail, just silence after silence. By the 4th call, I turned the phone over so I wouldn't see it vibrate. By the 7th, I put it in the drawer beside my bed and shut it completely. I already knew what this was. The music hadn't shown up, the wine hadn't arrived, the yacht never pulled into the dock. The party was unraveling, and now they remembered me. I spent the next few hours like I had nowhere to be. I brewed coffee, ate, slowly walked down the street to the corner bakery, and bought myself a croissant, something I never did when I was still busy fixing other people's emergencies. I sat on the bench outside watching people with somewhere to be rushed past. I didn't think about the party. I didn't think about the guests or the moment someone realized there was no orchestra tuning up or wine being poured. I let myself enjoy the fact that I had no role today, no clipboard, no calls to return. At noon, I turned my phone back on. 11 missed calls, 10 from my dad, 1 from my aunt. I let it ring once more. Then I picked up. He didn't yell. He didn't apologize. He just asked Alira what happened, like it was some unexplained event, like I'd gone rogue without warning, like the exclusion, the dismissal, the text, "You're not included," had never happened. I paused for a second. Then I answered the only way I could. "It's not personal," and I hung up. I stood in the kitchen phone, still in my hand, waiting for the rush of adrenaline that usually followed confrontation. But it didn't come. There was no wait, no regret, just stillness. That line, they had used it like a knife for years, a phrase to cut through responsibility, through acknowledgement, through consequences. And now I handed it back to them. It wasn't anger, it was a boundary. And this time, they were the ones on the outside of it. 3 days after the party, I opened my phone for the first time. There were no missed calls, no texts, no voicemails, just quiet like I'd slipped through a crack and no one noticed. I scrolled out of habit and landed on my sister's page. She had reposted someone else's photos, probably Amanda's, our cousin, who treated Instagram like it was a seasonal scrapbook. The caption read, "A beautiful celebration for 2 beautiful people." But the photos told a different story. There was no tent, just a patchy backyard with folding tables and a few sun-bleached plastic chairs dragged in from the garage. One picture showed a cooler on the grass, half-open bottles of soda floating in melting ice. Another captured a table centerpiece grocery store carnations, still in their plastic sleeves, shoved into a mason jar like someone gave up halfway through. In one frame, my dad stood near the fence, arms crossed, looking off toward nothing. He wore a dress shirt that didn't fit quite right. In another, my mom posed with 2 of her sisters. Her smile was stiff. Her eyes were puffy. I could see the line of uneven makeup under one of them. I stared at the photos longer than I meant to, not out of regret, but curiosity. It was like watching a version of reality I'd quietly been edited out of. They had a party. They celebrated. They smiled for the camera. And not one of them had the decency to reach out. Not to ask why I canceled. Not to ask if I was okay. They just moved on and filled in the gaps without me. And somehow that didn't hurt. It clarified. Because when I looked at those photos, I didn't see something I missed. I saw something I refused to carry anymore. The photos didn't make me sad. They made me take inventory of every task I'd taken on over the years without hesitation. Every time I drove 2 hours to fix the garage door or reprogram their thermostat. Every time I filed their taxes because you're so good with numbers. Every time I paid off a bill they casually mentioned over dinner and never brought up again. 2 years ago, I covered a $2,800 roof repair when my dad sighed about a leak and then stared at me for a beat too long. I wired the money that night. No one acknowledged it except my brother, who sent a thumbs-up emoji when the roof held through the first storm. I kept their HVAC system under my name because I'd signed up for the plan during an emergency winter breakdown. I paid their annual service fee automatically $315 a year. I'd almost forgotten it existed until I saw the charge again last month. And it wasn't just money. It was time. It was my Saturday afternoons. It was my quiet mornings spent researching the cheapest contractors, the fastest printers, the best sales on whatever it was they'd forgotten to plan for. It was emotional labor disguised as helpfulness, masked by politeness, never once mistaken for love. So I stopped. I logged into every account with my name on it, removed saved payment methods, canceled subscriptions, deleted reminders. I made calls, closed accounts, transferred responsibilities. It took a full afternoon, and when I finished, I didn't feel guilt. I felt lighter. That evening, I pulled out a half-finished side table I had abandoned months ago. I sanded the edges, glued the joints, and ran my fingers along the frame. There was peace in that building, something that didn't need me back. Something that stood because I chose to give it structure, not because it demanded it. And for the first time in years, I realized how quiet my life could be when it wasn't being spent on someone else's unfinished mess. The message came in just after noon. Amanda. Hey, your sister's been saying you ghosted the party, that something's going on, that they're worried about your mental health. I stared at the screen, not surprised, but still stunned. Ghosted, I planned the entire thing, paid for it, orchestrated every vendor and detail, and now I was a no-show with a supposed breakdown. They weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting me. I didn't even hesitate. I opened my receipts folder. Screenshot after screenshot, paid invoice for the yacht, the wine order confirmation, the paused catering contract. Then, the text from my aunt, "You're not included." Then, my mom's follow-up, "It's not personal." I sent them all to Amanda in a clean, quiet thread. She didn't respond right away. A few minutes passed. Then, "What the hell?" I had no idea. They made it sound like you were unstable. Unstable. That word stayed in my hands longer than the phone itself. After everything I had done the moment I stopped performing, they didn't ask why. They just filled the silence with something that made them feel better. I replied simply, "I didn't ghost the party. I wasn't invited to it." She didn't argue. I wasn't trying to stir things up. I wasn't looking for sides or sympathy. I just needed one person to see it clearly. I needed the truth to live somewhere outside of me. Amanda said she believed me, said it made sense now why the wine didn't show why the tent never arrived. They didn't say any of that, she wrote. Of course they didn't. I put down the phone and felt the difference instantly. Not relief, not validation, just clarity. The kind that doesn't beg to be understood. It just exists. The first message came 2 days after Amanda's. My brother. "Hey, not sure if you heard, but the internet's been down all morning. Dad's losing it. Know anything about routers? I didn't respond." The next day, my mom, "Hi, Elira. The microwave's acting up again. Not urgent, but if you have a minute." Still nothing. Then my dad sent a photo. The garage door motor, half disassembled wires exposed. No words, just the image like I'd see it and come running. I didn't. I stared at it for a few seconds, then closed the message and got back to my grocery list. It kept happening every couple of days, a new text, a new problem. The gutters were backed up. The printer wasn't connecting. They couldn't remember how to access their tax files. Not one of them said sorry. Not one acknowledged the party. The messages weren't about mending anything. They were about maintenance. They weren't missing me. They were missing the unpaid labor. And I wasn't offering it anymore. I spent my time in smaller, quieter ways. I built a narrow shelf for the hallway. I went to a weekend flea market just because I could. I started going to bed earlier without the anxiety that someone might call with a crisis disguised as casual conversation. They used to treat my silence like a phase, something temporary, something to wait out. But this wasn't silence. This was a boundary. A firm, unfamiliar edge they couldn't reach past. And when they realized they couldn't cross it, they didn't apologize. They scrambled. Amanda texted me on a Thursday afternoon. Just said she was in town and had something she wanted to say in person, no pressure. We met at a quiet coffee shop a few blocks from my place. She looked nervous, which wasn't like her, and she didn't waste time. "I think your mom's actually going to therapy," she said. "For real. Like weekly sessions." She told my mom it started after the party. "After you went silent." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "She broke down when she tried to plan Thanksgiving," Amanda added. "No one volunteered to help. My dad told her, 'We're not doing that again.'" That's when she admitted everything. Not just about the party, about how she's treated you for years. Amanda paused, then reached into her bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. She slid it across the table. "It's from your dad," she said. "He asked me to give it to you." I unfolded it slowly. One sentence written in shaky all-caps handwriting I recognized instantly. "I'm trying to learn how to be a dad." No greeting, no signature. Just that. And yet somehow it landed deeper than all their forced smiles and polite excuses over the years. There was no pretending in that sentence. Just an awkward, raw attempt at honesty. I slipped the note into my bag and nodded. Amanda didn't press. She just said, "Whatever you decide, I get it," and left it at that. That night I sat at my desk with a blank card. I didn't want to undo the distance I'd built, but I also didn't want to ignore what felt like their first real step. So I wrote, "I'm not ready to return. But I'm open to something honest." I didn't sign it with love. Just my name. Then I sealed the envelope, placed it by the door, and told myself I'd mail it in the morning. Months passed and the quiet held. No chaos, no guilt-laced requests, just space. I spent my time in ways that didn't involve fixing things. I hiked canyon trails I'd always said I was too busy for. I cooked meals slowly without glancing at the clock. I built a bench for my front porch out of reclaimed cedar and sat on it with a mug of coffee each morning, watching the light change. I slept better than I had in years. Then one day a message came from my mom. It wasn't long, just that they wanted to meet if I was willing. No demands, no manipulation. I sat with it for a few days before answering. We met at a small cafe halfway between our homes. Neutral ground. They were already seated when I arrived. My dad stood when I walked in an old habit he hadn't dropped even after everything. My mom looked tired but more present than I remembered. They didn't start with excuses. They didn't list their regrets like a script. They just looked at me, and then my mother said, "We're sorry, Elira, for the way we treated you. For making you feel like help instead of family." My dad nodded. "We should have known better." The words weren't polished, but they were real. And for once they weren't trying to speed past the discomfort. I let the silence hang before I answered. "Thank you," I said. "I heard you, but I'm not coming back, not yet." My mom blinked, but didn't argue. My dad looked down at his hands. I stood and neither of them reached for mine. I left without anger, without a need to explain. Some doors don't slam. They just close quietly, cleanly, and you realize the lock was always on your side.